Wednesday's Live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This week, I wanted to treat the subject of reflected light in areas that are illuminated and in shadow. Hopefully, probably from the reference that I have here, you may not be able to see what I'm talking about. Hopefully I can convey that. Because part of that is the problem with a camera. When you take a reference photo, it kind of tends to darken the shadows. And hi, Carol. But I'll try to explain it as we go. This is the Mazzini Bridge over the Tiber in Rome. I seem to have a fascination with bridges. The bridges over the Tiber in Rome, the bridges over the Seine in Paris, all the wonderful bridges over the Mississippi, going back to, where I was born, the Pensacola Bridge over Escambia Bay. So, hi, Nancy. So, what I want to talk about here is when light, it's sort of this is the time of day here is almost 10 o'clock in the morning. Midday, the light will bounce. And I think this is a good subject to essay this because we have a neutral colored object, the stone of the bridge, and not early light, not late light. It's bouncing into water so that there's some reflection coming back up to the bridge, and interesting things can happen under here. The big point is, this is what you need to remember, that in times when the light coming on tends to bleach the color out, or the subjects themselves tend to be neutral colored objects, the reflected light in the shadows tends to be higher chroma and more and more colorful. So you can work those things, especially if it's reflecting off of something that bounces light good, like water or metal or any kind of smooth surface. So that's why we're going to use this. Going straight into the draw, I am going to look at my subject and say, oh, look at that. I've got some key horizontals here that are not quite horizontal. And they're, what's this? 1, 2, a little above a third. So here we go. There's that line. This line is pitched the other way. This pitches like that. This pitches like that. And this is roughly a little below the halfway point. So the draw here is going to be pretty easy. Now the key horizontal, key vertical, we really don't have maybe that. 1, 2, 3, a little bit past a quarter. I'm going to make a mark for that. But the key thing is I want to see where this comes almost at the top. And it ends down 1, 2, 3, 4, a little less than a quarter. So start here, end there. Some buildings here, some trees there. We're wanting to get these big lines in first. Now we've also got this walkway that I was standing on. This is not quite horizontal. This is, because it's more or less eye level. And it's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a fifth of the way. This is relational drawing. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth, again a fifth. This is going to help us find our arches. Where's the top of that? Is it above this? Yes. Okay. This one is below that. So our arch, boom. Now this arch has to go. Notice it's not a perfect, it's going to be more of a Nike swoop. And this one, oh my goodness, that's so tight. So we're going to darken these up as we go. We have this sort of thing there. We have a thing here. We have a thing here. I'm just crazy about bridges. I love bridges. Other side of the arch. There's a notch there. Notice that is not the same, quite the same curvature as this. And these are fungible. You can, you can adjust these as you go. So this is a Nike swoop. It's not a perfect parabola. It's a Nike swoop. This is a little bit more relaxed. And I'm sure there's an architectural term for this, but we don't know what they are. I don't know what they are. Okay. If there are any architects in the group, please enlighten me. So I'm going to darken up this drawing as I get it closer to what I need it to be. One thing I will say straight away is that puffy set of clouds there. Hi, Cindy. Cindy did a beautiful job at the workshop in Quincy last week. She's not a fast painter, but she's a good painter. I think that's a bit busy. I'm going to make that mostly blue. It's another way you could try to assess this when you're drawing is, do you see how that's kind of, if we turned it this way, it would be the state of Nevada, maybe a little skinnier at one end, but kind of that shape. So I'm very big on mnemonic devices that help you determine things like that. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a curvature to that, a little bit of a curvature to this. It has a foot. Foot over here. Foot, by foot I mean it comes out and then our walkway, and then there are the lovely reflections that happen. Probably don't have enough over here. So that, I'm going to call it a pylon for lack of knowledge of what it is architecturally, occurs on the walkway rather than in the river proper. Now there is this line and this line, they're not going to be parallel. They are, but from our viewpoint, they're not going to be. They're going to be tapered. So we have to take that into account. In perspective, your verticals are usually vertical unless the thing is an old building that's racking. Hi, Kathy. Well, thank you. I could screw it up. You don't know. We'll see. Thank you, though. But I want to kind of emphasize the lovely reflected light that comes off the water and bounces up underneath the bridge and happens like that. Now, most of this business with the architectural detail, I am going to paint when I actually get to that part of it. Meaning that the key thing I want to look out for is this and that and that and that. Can you see this shape in here? It's almost a Hawkeye thing. That's an Iowa deal. Notice that it stair steps into the shadow line. Now, I usually don't draw shadow lines, but today I think I am going to do it just to make things a wee bit easier. So most of these architectural details, as I say, I'm going to paint I'm going to make them as I paint them. They're not going to be drawing so much as doing that triangle thing in there. Now at this point, I'm going to get out my eraser if I can find it. Duh. Well, where it is. Still in the bag from this weekend. So I'm going to take out the lines that I don't want. And work from there. So, typical plan with a watercolor. We need to figure out what's light. Hi, Kathy. Oh, yes, I said hi to you. We need to figure out what's light, what's medium, and what's dark, because that's the general process by which we paint in watercolor. When I squint, the colors of the illuminated portions of the bridge and the retaining wall above the Tiber there are the lights, some of the reflections. I've already mentioned that I'm going to make this just basically a clear blue sky because I want it to support these warmer colors down here. So we'll get the palette out, we'll get the big mop brush, and we'll get our two buckets of water together, a clear water and a dirty water. So, yellow ochre is pretty good, or yellow ochre with a wee bit of burnt sienna and a lot of water is going to be a good equivalent of what's going on all in here. Yes, there will be more colors that will come over that. Maybe I'll put a little more yellow ochre in it. very pale, just off-white. I don't want this to, hi Michael, I don't want this to be too dark overall, because I want it to be midday, because I need it to, I don't want the shadows to be too dark, and you'll see why. So, down in here there are also some reflections. More color will be going down in here, so I'm going to put a little bit more yellow ochre into this section down here, because typically your reflection will not be the same value as the thing that is causing the reflection. There will be a difference. One will be darker, one will be lighter. In this case, I think that the object is lighter and the reflection is maybe a bit darker. So switching from there to a gray. So I've got a yellow ochre. I'm going to get some ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt sienna for a good neutral gray. And I'm going to put that underneath. I may actually be able to execute this in something of a triad palette. So far I've used yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. I'm going to see if I can get away with that. I may need to add an additional color. Now up here, this is, I'm touching it, it's starting to get dry enough that by the time I mix up the blue that I want to use for the sky, I'll be all right. Maybe I should put a little bit of yellow ochre into there and into there. So maybe actually a little more into here. For that, I don't know what the building was. Who knows? And it was a little bit more than that, but who knows? Okay. So, squinting. My goodness, squinting will get you so far in seeing an image. When you squint, and by squint I mean you close one eye altogether and then you bring the other one down until you just see the big, dark, light, medium shades. So I'm going to mop out what I've been doing, rinse the brush, blot it. Now I'm going to make a good big puddle of ultramarine blue. And it's going to be a beaded wash, which maybe is something I should treat as a standalone topic some Wednesday. Because it's a very useful technique. I need this to be runny because I need to get a bead going, and you'll see what I mean by a bead. But it needs to have a value jump between here, there, and there. So let's try a tester. Get a little something you can try things on. I don't want to mess up my... Here we go. That looks about right. Yeah. So that's where I'm going to start at the top here, and then I'm going to add a little bit of water as I go down. So maybe just a bit extra. Always mix more than you think you're going to need, because you can always modify this color later into something that you're going to use. And you don't want to run out. Here we go. See that bead forming up there? pick it up underneath, and the bead waits for me while I paint around these more complicated shapes on the bridge. Now at this point, I'm going to rinse it and bring some water to it to get it lighter. And if this picture comes off, I am going to have it displayed at Cindy's Art Beat for Art Walk this Friday. Rinsing again, bringing water to it. There's nothing but water in this brush right now. And I'm walking that bead down through those trees, down to that building. Now, as you can see, there's a dangerous looking bead forming up here. So I rinsed the brush, I blotted it to get the water out. Well, you're very welcome, Andrea. I can't tell you how much I enjoy doing this for all my painter friends. This is what we do, right? We're painters. Okay, now this, I think I want to let dry while I think about where to go in other areas. I don't think I want to use the hairdryer right now. I think I want to think about these areas down here because that's sort of, I'm moving into the medium values. And while that's waiting to dry, I can make those happen down here. I really like to avoid the hairdryer if I can. So, rinsing. And this is a good time to start talking about the reflected light. What do we see in reflected light? Ah, Patrick! Oh my goodness, you were up late. Oh, merci. Patrick from Brittany. In here, I've got a little bit of the light stuff. I could tint it later. When you see the reflected light, what happens is there's more color bounces into these shadows. And it will usually be, one, more colorful than what the areas where the light is hitting. And two, it might be a temperature shift or a chroma shift from what the light is. So as you're getting from, say, like 10 o'clock, and we're almost 10 o'clock here, to 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, the light will be very neutral, but in the shadows, it will be more colorful. So there's going to be warmer ochres and siennas and brighter yellows under here than just a dark grayish black. So I am going to get some yellow ochre, get it going over here. Maybe I'll put a little burnt sienna in it. And I'm going to underpaint. By underpaint, meaning I'm going to paint something that I'm probably going to paint something else on top later. So it'll look a little funny at first. Let's put a little blue in that. Going to lighten that, meaning I'm just putting some water in it. And maybe just a bit over here. There's some cast shadows over there. Now we're going to get, ooh, okay, just water. Now we're going to get into our water. I am going to, shoot, that blue that I used for the sky, I'm going to mop up this yellow ochre. Maybe get a little, oh, too much. I'm going to have to rinse that. That was the cadmium yellow light. Oh, look at that. Too much. Way too much. Mop it out. Rinse it. Blot it. More yellow ochre. I want a soft edge between here and here. Will we put more in? Yes. Later. From there, I'm going to take some of my ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, more ultramarine blue, perhaps a little bit of alizarin, the crimson red. I'm mixing these colors, the three, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. I want a gray, but a darker gray. A gray made up of a red, a yellow, and a blue. This I may need to let dry a bit. Now I can take advantage of the fact that it is damp. Hello, Anthony. The trick to seeing, you're bringing up a good point. Manuela, hello. You're bringing up a good point. Seeing values. You probably heard the thing about values do the heavy lifting and color gets the credit. When we're looking at a color, the most important aspect of it is its value. In other words, how dark or how light it is. The next most important item about a color is how vivid it is. There's other words for this. They call it chroma, saturation, intensity. I prefer to use the word vivid because everybody understands that. If it's a vivid blue or a vivid red or a vivid green, then everybody knows what that means. So a vivid color will assert more. It will come forward. A duller color, a more subdued color, a grayed down color will recede. So even if you have the so-called warm and cool thing, we talk about warm and cool, we all have to, I'm sure we've all encountered situations where a so-called cool color is in the foreground and a so-called warm color is in the background. And how do we render that? Well, we make the cool color more vivid. That's the one that's in the foreground. And we make the so-called warm color less vivid so that it recedes into the background. So that helps. Now I've got some greens going back here. I think I am going to just pop them in like that. I may do it here too, because that will, there were these lovely trees along the Tiber there. There's a few here too, isn't there? Showing there. I don't know who Giuseppe Mazzini is, but I guess he was somebody important in Italy. So those of you of Italian extraction could probably explain that to me. While this is wet, I'm going to get some of that blue that I had right there, and I'm going to translate that into the cast shadows on the side of the, what do you call that, a K? Or an embankment? Okay, now this we need to let dry. Because I'm down in the the living room, because the plague of cluster flies that is infesting rural Iowa right now. Hello, Shelley. Is I can't be upstairs in the studio. So I don't have a way of plugging well, geez, I suppose I could, but I don't know where it's at. I'm going to work in here because this is drier. When you're outside, for example, painting on location, you don't have an electrical outlet, so you have to find those areas where you work around your painting and you see, where can I paint? We got some foliage in here. So I'm going to get some ultramarine blue, some yellow ochre, and this is a slower moving mix of paint, which I'm putting into this area, which is somewhat dry, or somewhat moist. In other words, if I were to look at this from the side, I could see that there's some glisten on it. And I hope you can see this because it is a relatively overcast day, and I don't have overhead lighting in this room. C'est la vie, as the French say. C'est la vie. Sorry, Patrick. C'est la vie. We have to work with what we have. So I'm going to put a little bit of that. While this is still moisture on the surface there, I'm going to put some of this darker green in there. Using the Oriental brush, which is a little stiffer than the mop brush, so it holds the paint in a different way. So here we go. And if necessary, I will run upstairs and get the hairdryer, but I don't think we're going to need to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into the creamy ultramarine blue and get a very slow moving mix, put a little bit of alizarin in that, touch that in. Let's put the bottom parts, the shaded parts of those trees. Now, because that surface is wet, there's water on the surface of the paper. That paint is going to swim a bit. I could put a bit of that in here, couldn't I? And we are officially at the holy... Hi, Eric. Yay, Eric from Decorah. We're officially in the holy mess stage of the painting. It's the tie, where everything looks sort of like a tie-dyed mess. And that's where we grit our teeth. Still, I can touch that and it feels cool. Now, when I touch that and it feels cool, that means that there's water below the surface of the paper that is still damp. And if I'm not careful, if I put in runny paint there, it's going to create blossoms. Now up here, there's still water on the surface, so if I touch it into that, the darker color is going to stay pretty much where I put it, but it's going to melt at the edges. I can't really get in here and do these colors yet because they are, and I shouldn't, because they are the darkest. They're the darkest darks that we're going to deal with. So they go in last, correct? So let me get a sip because I'm talking here. All right, where can I work? I can work in here. There's some interesting for that, I'm going to go with some burnt sienna and some ultramarine blue to get a pale dark. There are some things there. That, a little more blue. We haven't painted the sky for a while, so this we can do. You have to love the Italians. They have a beautiful, beautiful sense of design. They can sculpt. 3D things seem to come naturally to them. So the reflected light issue, I am going to be mixing a combination of a so-called cool color and a so-called warm color. So that's the blue and the burnt sienna. Yeah, so I'm painting up here because this is still too damp to be painting. And hopefully you can see sort of our image starting to appear. How do we see this? Squint. Squint, 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 squint. More ultramarine. Ooh, that's too blue. A little more water. Okay. I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this. I need to have more yellow ochre into the burnt sienna ultramarine blue mix, especially right in there. Here too. Parts of there too, parts of here too, parts of there too. This is getting close to what we need. The bluer, darker, the mix of burnt sienna and blue, I'm going to do that. There's a bit above it. There's a roof line back there. There's a, oh boy. Down here, I think we can work. And we'll be in the meeting. Now, notice that there are some reflections that are very light here, here, and there, but here, here, and here, they are darker greens. Oh, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, drawing is the skeleton for a watercolor. It's the skeleton that you put the flesh on. You don't have to draw the thing down to the last brick. You do have to know where things go. That's the most important thing. There's a hierarchy to drawing, which involves the most important thing is where is it? If you get it in the wrong place, anything you draw after that is going to be wrong. So you need to get it in the right spot. That's the most important thing. The second most important thing is the size of it. How big is it? You have a little bit of leeway with that. You can modify those things a bit to your artistic license, but the where of it is a little more important. After that, the shape. That is the least important thing, and yet we tend to draw the shape first and worry less about how big is it and where is it. And that's what creates the problems. So get it in the right spot, and you have a little more leeway with the shape of it. And the size of it. Less with the size, more with the shape. It's a definite hierarchy. I don't think we appreciate that enough. Now there's also a hierarchy in color. And I think I just touched on that earlier. The hierarchy in color is the value. If we want to get a convincing sense of the light or the time of day or the season or the weather, we have to get the value relationship right because the light determines the value. So get the value right. Then we have to get the chroma right. And, and the least important thing is the color. I mean, you've probably seen those painters who will substitute other colors, and it looks very wild and gorgeous, actually. And yet, it looks like the thing that it is. That's because they've got the position of it right, they've got the size of it right, they've got the shape of it right, they've got the value of it right, they've got the vividness of it right, and they've changed the hue, because that's the thing that matters the least. So Michael brought up a point. What hardness of pencil do I prefer? To me, 3B is the Goldilocks pencil. What you want is a pencil that is soft enough to be dark so that you can see it on the paper, but it's not so soft like a 4B or a 6B that when you apply the wash, it washes the pencil away and then you don't know what you drew. And you don't want it to be so hard like a HB or a number 2 pencil so that it digs a groove in the paper. So I find 3B in general to be the one that works the best. 2B will work, 4B will work. And, honestly, there are guys that just use a regular number 2 pencil, which is HB would be the equivalent of that. So where I was going to go next, I was going to work on the reflections in the water here. So I need some green. I'm going to get some of that cad yellow light, some ultramarine blue, this will not be the last color that goes in here. Let's add a little bit of blue to that. A little bit more yellow, a little bit more blue, a little bit more water. I don't want to be too strong. Wet color into wet color. Here we go. Oh my goodness, yes. Okay, see there's some dangerous drips happening right there. Blotting the brush, mopping it up. There's some pale greens happening back here. Okay. I'm going to try to stay with a triad and not smuggle some turquoise in, but I cannot help it. I'm a turquoise freak. Cobalt turquoise. I'm going to work away from my cobalts, I promise. Runny paint into runny paint. Dissolves. It's like putting milk into hot cocoa. It disperses. Another way you can get some interesting reflections is just rinse your brush, dry it, mop it out where you don't want it. Just let it work. Maybe get some ultramarine blue in there to get a little bit darker. Touch it in. Here we go. Milk into the hot cocoa to get a more intense reflection. Remember, it's water. Just about anything can happen. A little more ultramarine. I'm putting like consistency into like consistency. The surface is wet. It's going to look like a holy mess, I know that. Hi, Vicky. But we have faith. We had a plan. Our plan was we're working dark to light, big to small, wet to dry. Okay, this we're going to let dry a little bit. I'm blotting that brush over here on this. This is a like microfiber towel. And I'm mopping up the loose paint over here. There are going to be some darker greens that go in like that. Now I'm testing this. It's still a little bit damp. Doggone it. I'll work up here. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. I'm starting to get to the slower moving mixes of paint. See, that's not going to, when I tilt it, it's not going to run. So it's a more blue than brown. And the blue involved is ultramarine blue. Now notice I'm going to make these marks here, less here, probably not at all there. Why is that? It's because the contrast level of these various things is going to be higher, closer to us than it is further away. And that's just the effect of atmosphere and distance. And it is one of those things that you will see if you just squint. Close one eye. Go somewhere, get a nice glass of something, close one eye, close the other eye halfway, and just look at that. And I honestly think if you tried to paint what you see when you squint, if you tried to do a scrupulous transcription of what you see when you squint, you're going to get a very good painting. Our eyes are just too darn good. There's no getting around it. Our eyes are better than we need them to be. Does that make sense? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Okay. Now, I think I'm getting to where I can do some of these shadows. Oops. That are here, because we're moving from light to dark. So I'm going to start with the one back here and the one back here. Now you notice if you squint, this one's the darkest. This one's a little less dark. That one a little less dark still. So I'm going to get into that blue-brown mix, ultramarine and burnt sienna, meaning that as I come forward, oh, that's probably too strong. I am going to want to have more of the color in this end, less of the color in that end, still less in the color of that end. So here we go. Let's see if, look at that shape. What does it look like? Further away, don't make as big a deal out of it as you're going to make out of this. All right. The reflected light, it's going to be, farther away it's going to be dark, and where it's darkest, it will be the blues. And then below that, it's going to be more of the sienna and the yellow ochre. So I'm touching into the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna. And I'm drawing that shadow. So it's bluer up here and more yellow ochre and sienna down there, with the exception of some dark bits here and here. Probably can't see this the way I can. Doggone it. There's some green here, and I'm going to touch that in here and there to do this stuff. Same up here. Why am I working here? Because it's the right level of dryness. constantly aware of where have I just painted. Because if I've just painted somewhere, it's still probably wet. That means if I bring in runny paint, I'm probably going to get a blossom. So if I want to put more in there, I have to bring in something that is more pigment, less water, so that it doesn't create a problem. Right at the top of this, some ultramarine blue. I'm going to let it work its way down. There's some lovely graffiti on the opposite. But this is not the right scale for indicating that. Right there is what I'm working on now. This surface is still a little bit damp. Okay, I've done that one, I've done this one. This is the important one. This is the one that I want to really say the reflected light. So this is where I'm going to want to make sure I get a lot of the blue up here, some of the burnt sienna in there, and the yellow ochre sienna down there. So I'm going to have to mix up both. Let's mix up a blue. Let's even put a little bit of alizarin in it to get a purple. Why? Purple. Because if I want to wind up yellow here, purple is the complement of yellow. And it's just going to look good. No other excuse than that. Down here, I want it to be more olive ochre kind of color, and then I'll try to get a little darker right there. And then we're going to adjust some of these small marks like that. So I need a lot of the purple. I need a lot of the burnt yellow, blue, the ultramarine blue burnt sienna mix. Heavy on the burnt sienna. For this area, very important that when you're trying to do these sort of things, that you have all the colors mixed up ahead of time. You don't want this drying out while you're mixing the color that you need here. And then some yellow ochre with a bit of burnt sienna in it. And here we go. Grit my teeth. Get a little extra. Okay. Coming down, that's purplish. I'm going to the sienna ultramarine blue mix. Rinsing, blotting, going to the yellow ochreish mix. And I hope. Watch those little jogs, which define the oh, it's going down in there, but that's okay. We don't worry about that yet. Something like that happens. Blot your brush, get all the water out of it. Mop it up. I'm going to go back to the purple, because you see how it's very dark there? So more blue, more alizarin, slow moving paint. Anywhere else I can use this. under there. Perhaps a little bit under here. Okay. Now, I need to get some blue, slow moving, some yellow ochre to make an olive color. Maybe some turquoise. I'm a turquoise junkie. Blotting the brush, rinsing it, teasing this out. Some of that same stuff. It's still wet here. There are little reflections that come down there. And while this has sort of encroached on our foreground area, we will define the foreground area. Hi, Judy. Hi, Vicki. We'll define that foreground area based on where the stuff tends to migrate. I'm going to take some of that green and I'm going to reinforce the trees up here. So far, I'm pretty happy because this is looking like a watercolor and not an oil painting. There are some wonderful cobblestones. I think I will work. So this is what I wanted to get for the idea of the reflected light. We go from a purple to a reddish rusty brown to a yellow ochre, and that's more of what you will actually see when you are in these places. The camera won't quite capture it, so I'm going back with the purple mix of the ultramarine blue and the alizarin, and I'm going to try and get a little bit of here. Some of that there too. I do need a greenish mix, so I'll get some yellow and some blue. There. Oh, I like that little sparkle that's happening there. Dark there. In here, I need that to be good and dry. Or the brush needs to be good and dry. So this is dry brush taking advantage of the texture of the paper. The situation is there's not much paint on the brush, and there's not much water in the brush. So some of this architectural detail in the railings, it'll be more apparent closer to us further apart, less apparent as we get further down the bridge. Well, thank you, Shelley. A little more of that. A little darker there, a little darker here. I'm thinking at this point, I would wish this was the dry, bone dry, but it's not. So I'm drying the brush, squeezing all the water out of it, and I'm going to try to pull some paint away there. The board is at a 45-degree angle, so the water is migrating downhill, which helps me because it can't spread out in 360 degrees. So I know that up at the top it's drier, down at the bottom it's a little wetter. That gives me a little bit of a advantage. I'm going to glaze the front side of this a little darker. Same here. Perhaps that section there, this section here. Getting some darks, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. There are these bridges, I'll tell you, oh my goodness. Most of the day and certainly into the evening, excellent musicians come out and play on these bridges because they're mostly foot. Some of them will allow automobile traffic. Most of them tend to be foot traffic. But the musicians come out and it's wonderful. I mean, they are like, pick your favorite genre. You like salsa, they got salsa. You like jazz, they got jazz. You like rock, they got rock. Whatever you like. There's somebody who is really darn good playing on these bridges most of the day. Okay, this I would like a little drier, but I'm going to get some darks and I'm going to splatter some texture in there and splatter it, smear it to help with the cobblestone effect. Notice that the point of the brush is going this way. If the point of the brush was going this way, I'd have birds. So the fact that there's cobblestones there is not as important as this business up here. So now the only thing I want to do is, since this is relatively dry, with some very stiff paint, meaning mostly pigment and a little bit of water, I'm going to try to indicate these weeds or things that grow along the walkway there. Maybe I could even splatter those if I'm careful. Oh yeah, just what we want. That's just the sort of thing. Touching into that wet area. Okay, I think I'm going to, at this point, I think I could make a more delineated area out of the ultramarine and possibly a little bit more dark in here. That's still, oh yeah, that's still wet. So when I put in this mixture of burnt sand and ultramarine, it's going to bleed in and it's going to bleed down because that surface is moist. And that's beneficial to me because it'll look like a reflection if I'm lucky. I might put a little bit of a line in here. With some greenishness. The reflections are strange here, but I'm going to, with a damp brush, try to soften edges. And make them look plausible. Okay. All right, let's pull the tape on this and see what we're getting. Sometimes seeing a white edge on your picture will tell you a little bit about what you need to have. Okay, oh, well, I can see I do need to have some scruffy wear marks. So a little bit of the blue-brown mixture, fair amount of the water, and a very dry brush. Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to try to pull down with a light touch some of those wear and tear marks. And here we have the Giuseppe Mazzini Bridge. I don't know who Giuseppe Mazzini was. I hope he was a good guy and wasn't some sort of fascist or something. Complicated place, Italy. Okay. I do think I would like to have a little more interest here in the foreground with our cobblestones. There we go. Anyway, I think I'm going to display this at Cindy's Art Beat for Art Walk this Friday. That's in Fairfield. I think a lot of places have these sort of, I'm going to put some of those windows on that building back there, but not too many. And maybe a little bit of that. So there we go. Giuseppe Mazzini Bridge. Reflected light. The issue being in reflected light that in the shadows there is more color or more vividness than there is in the illuminated areas, such as the stone part of the bridge or maybe the water. Not so colorful, but the shadows themselves will have a little more color. Oh, yes, about the art walk. In Friday, starting at about 6:30 in Fairfield, you can walk around to the various venues on the square. Also at the Arts and Convention Center, which is a block off of the square, there will be, oh my goodness, a really, really good. I'm not too big on abstract painting, but John Carlson from Burlington is an abstract artist whose work I really like, and he has a show opening there in the main gallery of the Arts and Convention Center, which is a block off of the square and right across the street from the courthouse. I will have in the hallway gallery of the same venue a few paintings from my trips to Italy and France. There's a art supply store on the square, Cindy's Art Beat. I'm going to have a couple of paintings, probably this one there. There will be pop-up galleries all along there, interesting food. Oh my gosh. Music on the square, and just a whole lot of fun. For a town this size, it's our art footprint is gigantic. So, hope you all enjoyed this. The big point I wanted to get here was that reflected light at times of day when there's high illumination, more color, more chroma in the shadows. And it works best with a neutral colored object like this bridge. If you'll think of Monet, when he wanted to show the impressionist color, the effect of reflected light, he chose things like hay bales, which are neutral colored. He chose the Rouen Cathedral, which is a neutral colored stone building, and really showed that off. So these are the things to look for and to enjoy in just walking around and looking at stuff. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you all for tuning in, and bye-bye.